let's go. All right, man. We are live here, and I've got one of my industry amigos here, and we've seemed to have crossed paths over the years several times here, Scooter. And I'm a big fan of a lot of the content you produce. I love your the way and cadence you report on the carriers, quarterly earnings for the public carriers, and a lot of your opinions on the industry. So I think it's pretty awesome to get you wrangled up and into the ShipTalkers show for the first time. I think some of the stuff that is obviously top of mind across the industry, we've got a lot of buzz around NMFTA as we keep trekking down this. We're getting much, much closer to June 19th or July 19th, rather. And I'm hoping the date doesn't change anymore beyond this. I know it's changed a few times, but let's just start there. We'll unpack that. We might veer into some of your quarterly earnings, what you're seeing in the industry. Let's kind of talk about shippers and some of those changes right out of the gate. I know I've talked to Keith Peterson. We've hosted webinars here internally with our shippers. And I don't know about you, but this is kind of what I'm seeing just from a high level view is you've got a pizza pie with about a third of the shippers who are aware of this, right? And they're like leaning into it, trying to figure it out. They want to figure it out. You've got another third of this that are like, you know what? I'll just wait till this happens. I'll see what happens on July 19th. Not going to worry about it right now. I think you got another third of this that are just blissfully ignorant and don't really have an idea of this, nor how it's going to impact them.
Yeah. Well, Bobby, first off, glad to be here, honored to be here. Great to spend some time with you. I do enjoy getting to run into you at different industry events, and we always have these same kind of conversations. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I'm bumping into you at an event, and we're just sitting down chatting about stuff, right? It's got a very natural flow to it. But I agree that there are like three tranches out there, right? You've got the leading edge customers that they were actually working on doing things before these changes were even announced. They were seeing the direction, right? Then you've got the tranche that kind of knows what's happening, but maybe I don't really understand it. I'm not going to worry about it. And then you've got the tranche that's oblivious to it, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think I'd put them into thirds. I would just put them into three tranches. I think that first tranche of the ones that really know and understand what's going on, it's a small tranche. I would call it maybe 5% at best. I think the other two tranches are much bigger and maybe they're equal size. I think there's a substantial number of shippers that really don't even know that this is coming. I was just at a big industry event called ProMat. Spoke with a lot of shippers, and as they came by and we talked to them, that was one of the questions me and our team asked them is, what are you doing to prepare for the NMF changes? And half the time they were like, tell me what you're talking about. So
what changes?
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot that don't know, and they're either not going to find out until after the changes come into place and then the invoices start coming in, or maybe they will never pick up on it. They will just get impacted even more than they are today, but they're still going to be oblivious to it.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Now, let me ask you from this perspective. You are that shipper, right? How do you, or how would you prepare if Scooter Sayers had to put his shipper hat on today? Obviously, the docket's released, but there's some challenges. Let's be honest. There's some challenges from a shipper side of the fence of how do I go about understanding how these changes are going to impact me directly, and what do I even do to model those changes to understand how this is going to impact my freight as it correlates to an expensive sales, right? Because everything I sell has got freight nested in it, and that impacts my costs, and I want to understand it.
That's right. Yeah, I think there's two things that you need to be doing as a shipper right now if you haven't already done it. I think number one, you need to start dialoguing with your service provider, right? Whether you're working directly with a carrier or you're working with a 3PL or a combination of both. I think you need to be dialoguing with them and having them help you understand how this is going to impact you. You're as a shipper, your 3PLs or your carriers or both, they probably know more about your freight than you do, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a great place to start. Um, the carriers in particular, they've got dimensioners. They know about you. They know a lot about your freight. And I think that you go to them, they're going to be able to help. Number two, I think you as a shipper, you need to be looking at what you're shipping. You need to know what NMF numbers am I using to ship my freight? How much of each NMF item number do I have? And I need to be going to the NMFTA's website and looking at the docket and looking at the Excel file that they have to show you what items are being changed. And you need to know which ones are going to be impacted. And here's why. It's not just that on July 19th, I may have a change in what I pay. My item number is probably going to be canceled. And on
Mhm.
July 19th, if I'm shipping with NMF item number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it may no longer be a valid item. And if I continue using it on my bill of lading, that's going to be a red flag for a carrier to say, let's go inspect this freight. And no one wants that, right? So
Yeah.
you've got to make sure you know which items need to be updated in your database so that when you're shipping on July 19th forward, you've got the right numbers, not expired numbers.
Yeah, and when I think about it from this standpoint, I really feel for a lot of these shippers because I think about what are their their current tool sets today to even be able to really validate and understand this. So you just mentioned, yeah, I can go hit that docket, it's public information. I can go review those 99 provisions. I could go look and reference the NMFC item numbers, but I
Mhm.
might be deficit on tools like Classit. I know they're revamping Classit Plus. I feel that there's a role of products like My Carrier where we're not only trying to work on this like with folks like you from a thought leadership perspective, but
Mhm.
empower them with a tools to kind of go through a product led journey that helps them understand this change a little
Mhm.
better, right? Like we're working, we want to bring in Classit Plus. I want to be able to have them reference item numbers
Mhm.
within entering their commodity, be able to reference those, look those up, and get it right. Give them the density class on the sub
Mhm.
13, but I
Yep.
think a lot of them have a challenge. Like, how would you go about it today if you had several different items? How would you model that out? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To understand
Yeah.
the impacts to revenue.
Yeah, well, so first off, let me apologize because when I said service providers, I said carriers and 3PLs, and I should have said tech providers like you, right? That's a
Yeah.
huge oversight on my behalf. Here's why that is because you are in a great position to help your customers. Because number
Mhm.
one, you know which items are going to be canceled and will be null and void on July 19th. So if I'm using the My Carrier platform and I type in that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 NMF item number that on July 19th no longer exists, you should be able to say, stop, we need to go fix this, right?
Yeah.
You also have gathered a lot of other data. So you are also one of those parties that can help shippers help to navigate this. So
Yes.
I think that, I think that's what you really got to do as a shipper. Now, if you can get with your service provider and they have near perfect information and they're willing to share it, they should be able to tell you that we've modeled your business over the last 3 months and it's going to be a 1.95% price increase or decrease for you, right? They
Yeah.
should be able to do that. But if that perfect information is not there, then I think you're just going to have to infer it, and you have to start with the commodities I use the most and the ones I use the least, and pay special attention to those commodities that tend to be bulky versus
Yeah.
dense. Because if you ship dense freight, you're probably going to be okay with these changes. If you ship bulky freight, you're probably going to be paying more with these changes.
Yeah, and I'm thinking a lot right now, like furniture manufacturers, things like that. Even if it's Katie and boxes, people floating around, that 125 up to 250 range could really
Mhm.
see some impacts there. And then I also thought from the shipper side, it could create an opportunity for you to look at either consolidation opportunities or how you sell your physical product to incent your buyer to buy more to increase the density of what goes on that pallet. Now, not everybody's
Mhm.
going to have that opportunity, but if I'm
Right.
a shipper, I'm going to start looking at sales mechanisms that I can do once I understand these impacts to say, hey, how can I either repackage or get more, right? More
Mhm.
density on here to incent my buyers to buy more. And
Yeah.
hopefully it's not at the end of the month, like every month when these purchasing teams are running out there,
Yeah.
shoving stuff
Yeah.
down your
We,
throat
we're,
and all
we're
volume.
10% short of our goals, right? Let's go
Yeah.
run a fire sale, right? So yeah, I think that's the beauty of the changes is that
Mhm.
once you get past the disruption, These changes are really designed to incent every shipper out there to take air out of their pallets. Number one, take air out of the boxes themselves. And number two, when you put those boxes on a pallet, take the air out of the pallet itself, right? If you're building that pallet that's pointy on top, get rid of the point and make it nice and level, right? If you've got a 40 by 48 skid and you've got a lot of that surface area that's left exposed, how do I cover more of that surface area, right? I
Yeah.
think
Are,
that's
are
what,
you referring to our freight dunce cap that they put on the pallets? Yeah,
sure.
the do
So,
not double stack. I don't think
mhm,
shippers are aware that when you run that under a dimensionalizer, and I'm sure at Cubiscan it'll pick it up too, right? If I have that under
mhm.
there, it picks that up as the height.
Yep, that's right. That is part of the pallet. That is part of the
Yep.
package. So,
And if
and
that's
on
six
top of that,
inches, you just added 6 inches, which is going to skew the math on your density calculation.
yes, and you also need to be mindful that depending upon the carrier rules tariff, there may be a clause that allows them to bump that height even higher.
Oh, like I can think of a few now. I think there's an item 111 with one national carrier, another one calls it like 170 something. And but yeah,
Mhm.
basically if it's over 60 or 65 inches, they're charging you all the way to the ceiling on that freight because they can't really put top freight on top of it, right? Can't
Yeah.
really put a
Yeah.
pallet on top of that with the E-track racking system.
Yeah. Well, my opinion is, and others may not share this opinion, but my opinion is, from my experience in LTL, is that you as a shipper putting those cones on your freight, it is providing no benefit to you. It's only
No.
costing you money. If you were to take those cones off and use good packaging, good bill of lading notations, you're not going to see much of a difference in how that freight's handled. The carriers are generally pretty good at that, and so it's
Yeah.
really only costing you money. It's a frustration for the carriers, and you're better off just not using those.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of that comes from and we've been in this industry a long time. Like when I got in, not every trailer had E-tracks and nice racking systems, right? Like when I was at Best Way or Redaway, we were literally driving the forklift in with those old school racks that was just like 48 on top,
Yeah, full
48
table.
on bottom, right? And
Mhm,
people would do that. Or you would literally double stack the pallets, right? And one would become an accordion and one rode free. But there's different levels of service providers out there. Like when I went to Old Dominion, man, we had
mhm,
air guns at every door, electronic manifests, clean
mhm,
dunnage, like lots of E-track straps to really do it the right way.
mhm,
But one of the things you said stuck out to me about the carriers, and you and I both know that some are better than others at dimensionalizing every stick to be able to go back to you and say, hey, based on this analysis, you will get a 2% increase, right?
mhm,
So, not everything is created equal in LTL with regard to that, but we both know, and you've been selling Cuba scans, and a lot of carriers use your particular tool. They're I would imagine they're buying more of these and putting them in more service centers than just break bulks. What are you seeing there from the carriers pivoting and getting ready for this change? Because it's not just the shippers. There's a
mhm.
whole gambit. Tech providers have to pivot, carriers have to pivot, shippers have to pivot.
Yeah, I think carriers are going to get more dimensioners because of these changes,
Mm-hmm.
not because they are sensing or expecting a positive revenue change. I think it's because more and more freight is going to be priced based upon dimensions and weight, and so for them to
Yeah.
take full advantage of that, they've got to have more dimensioners. They're also getting more dimensioners because they're wanting to optimize as much of their operation as they can, especially
Yeah.
their line haul. There, a lot of carriers run a line haul optimization every day, right? They don't route freight over the road the same way day after day after day. They look at the freight they have and make determinations on.
Mm-hmm.
I might have run something from Dallas to Kansas City direct yesterday, but today I'm not going to do that. I'm going to send it to Little Rock instead,
Yep.
for example. They can't optimize those routings unless they have good data. And if they are
Mm-hmm.
picking up freight and they have no idea how big it is, that's a problem. So they're getting more dimensioners out there at end of lines to pick up that data as soon as they can. That's what the carriers want. They
Yeah.
want excellent data on every single shipment as soon as they can possibly get it. That's what
Yeah.
they want and need. So
Now, here's a big piece of what I consider the change management. Before we kick this show off, you and I were kind of having some playful banter about that when you were at ABF and the
mhm.
whole how does it impact us, the customer, and then things we don't even think about. there is a lot of tech provider platforms, whether it be 3PL or true SaaS out there, don't require the customer to enter dimensions today.
Mhm.
And if you have 1,000 customers or 5,000 customers, how are you going to change their workflow? They haven't been entering it today. They've been spoiled, right? They're just entering handling unit, class, weight, easy for me, get it out the door. This is a big change factor to it. And I think of this more in the 3PL realm where a lot of transactional freight moves completely devoid of dimensions.
Yeah, yeah. I think anybody that is selling a TMS and backing mine, if all I'm doing is just selling a TMS, maybe I don't do this. But if I am selling a TMS for customers to use with my services, like what my carrier's doing,
Mm-hmm.
I would absolutely suggest that you require dimensions 100% of the time.
Yeah.
My experience is if you do that, you're still going to get garbage. But it's pretty easy most of the time to tell whether it's garbage, right? If you
Yeah.
require a field and I put in one by one, you're going to know it's garbage, right?
Yeah.
So I think you require it, and I think you use it to guide customers to the right answer. Um, and I think you're better off doing that than not doing that. That's the
Yeah.
future anyway. So I think that's one of the first things that you do. So
Yeah. And I know over here we measure that and we've required DIM since day one. And originally when we started this back in 2018, we would get some initial pushback when customers came in because it was new to them.
yeah.
I don't even see it anymore, man. It's
Mhm.
been pretty good. And of the, 9,500, 10,000 monthly shippers we'll have, I less than five, less than the number of fingers I have are entering 111. So I have
Yeah.
seen really clean data. They don't want to
Mhm.
not enter it, but my question that I don't know, right, is how accurate are the DIMs they're entering of 48,
Yeah.
49, 75, or whatever it is? I don't get to see the
Mhm.
other side of the carrier's data. I would love
Mhm.
to be able to mesh that up together, but that's
Mhm.
something I don't have privy to. I've done it with certain carriers where they've given us a very high scorecard,
Mhm.
within fractions of an inch of what the customers are entering, but I don't think the DIM change is going to be that hard, but I think it's going to be a lot of architectural changes and workflow changes that these tech
Yeah.
providers are going to have to make,
Mhm.
coupled with the customer getting used to 3 additional fields of data entry. And as you know, might have to
Mhm.
take out this old thing called the tape measure.
Yeah.
Or if I'm a high volume shipper, I may want to look at a Cubiscan offering to be able to automatically dimensionalize these and not create a bottleneck on fulfilling orders.
Yeah, I think there's two big process changes that a shipper needs to look at. Number one, they absolutely need to be looking at a process that not just captures accurate dimensions and weight at that handling unit level and really photographs. I think photographs are critical too. They need a process that not just captures it because you've got customers that are doing that now, right? You require DIMS on the quote on the bill of lading. Your
Yep.
customers are entering it, so they're capturing it, but you also need a way to digitally capture and store that data. It's got to be
Mhm.
digital. If it's digital, then you said yourself, I don't know how they came up with the number, right? I don't know how they measured that pallet. Well, if they can capture the data digitally, that means they're using a solution where you can verify how they captured it, right? Whether it's a Cubiscan dimensioner or some of the systems on the market that are fairly inexpensive for a small shipper to use, it captures the data digitally, and there would be a way for you to know that's where it
Mhm.
came from. You could not only pass the length, width, and height, but you could say this data was captured by this device ID, and you would know
Mhm.
that, right? So I think shippers absolutely need a process to capture the data if they're not doing it now in a way that stores the data so it gets to the bill of lading immediately, and then if there's a reclass or a damage claim that they want to go look at 2 weeks later, they can pull all that data back up again, right? If they don't
Yep.
do that, all the data goes in the trash. They've got no backup, right? They have nothing to defend themselves. And if they don't store those photos, they can't go back and show the carrier, here's what my pallet looked like before you picked it up, and here's what it looked like after it was delivered. And you have those two comparisons. So,
Yeah, and I
that's
love that because it's really an evolution of where it all started with just getting a scale and a
mhm.
certified scale certificate that you're weighing your freight. Now, does Cubiscan take pictures when it dimensionalizes? If like I'm a shipper and that's on my dock, is that picture being taken at time of packaging?
Yeah, so with the system that we have that's really good for shippers that have a stretch wrapper, we're
Yep.
taking photos of all four sides of that pallet while it's being
Nice.
wrapped. So you've got, really good evidence to see what that pallet looked like. A lot of our customers are getting that dimensioner not so much for the dimensional data, but they want those photographs. They're putting
Hmm.
multiple cameras on there because they want photographs of the pallet so that if, retailer ABC sends them a chargeback for a damaged pallet or whatever. You ship me a blue pallet rather than a red one, like you were supposed
Yeah.
to. They can come back and they can defend that chargeback.
Yeah.
Today without that, they have no recourse. They just have to
Yeah.
eat it. So
Now it's funny you say that magic word of retail, and LTL is becoming more and more of a strong modal option within the retail space. But
mhm.
when I back up a little bit and I really think about it, I don't care what business you're in. I think the customer experience is all becoming more retail generated, right? Even in B2B.
Yeah.
The retail end of like business to consumer is now bleeding into B2B, from visibility to getting ASNs out to exchanging information of systems. And I think it's been pretty neat to see, coupled with these NMFTA changes, the industry is finally moving forward pretty fast, but it is creating a lot of change management impacts that have to go, because we've never
Mhm.
really, as an industry, drawn a line in the sand about how we want customers to convey and transmit information.
Mhm. Yep. And I think we're about to see a big revolution on that. What I'm hearing from carriers is I want this good data from my customers. I want it digitally, right? I want that
Mm-hmm.
electronic bill of lading. I want all that good data before I pick up the freight. Me getting all that data, it saves me time and money, right? So I need to go find a way to incent my shippers to give me that. And what,
Yeah.
what I tell shippers that are evaluating systems like Dimensioners, and think about all the benefits that accrue on that, right? To be able to digitally capture all this data and get it to your carrier as soon as you can. Think about you and a competitor of yours right next door to you. You're equal in every way, shape, or form. Same product, everything. They're capturing data and they're giving it to their carrier before pickup. You're not doing that. Which
Yep.
one are your carrier partners going to prefer, right? Which one is going to get the better pricing over time? Which one, when capacity gets tight and your carrier can only pick up one more pallet, but they've got two to pick up, who are they going to go pick up, right? I
Mm-hmm.
think that's going to be where the carriers get that separation going, is how I really look at those customers that are easy to do business with.
Yeah. Now, on the end of this, with customers who may not really understand this change or understand it enough to realize, hey, this might impact rates, what type of behavior do you think they'll exhibit? I've talked to a few carriers that are pretty mindful that, hey, the request for pallet rates might really pick up, because these shippers are going to think that, well, I don't have to worry about class or these changes if I go to pallet rates. And
Mhm.
now you're going to create a new problem. I would love to just not have pallet rates at all within LTL. That's my belief, because I think they're harder tariffs to manage. They lock you within regional or dimensional restrictions. But
Mhm.
I can see, I don't want to call it malice behavior, Scooter, but trying to exhibit behavior to not conform to the changes that the NMFTA, the carriers in the industry, are really wanting to move to. Are you seeing anything with that? Talking to carriers, do you think anything like that will happen?
Well, I think you're going to have some shippers that feel like I'm number one, I'm protected because I have my FAK, or I'll just get an FAK to go cover this, right? And pallet rates are really kind of like a form of FAK from a carrier standpoint. When you put out a pallet rate or an FAK to customers, you're worried that you're not going to get that cross section of their freight. You're only going to get that tranche that favors the customer with that
Yeah.
rate. What I'm hearing from carriers is, number one, we already hate FAKs. We don't like them. They represent risk, and we're going to price that risk into the overall pricing. Um, um, I think that's going to escalate as these changes roll out. I think we're going to see carriers really start pushing back on FAKs. And if
Yeah.
customers demand to keep it in place, or they demand to have it to protect themselves from these changes, I think the carriers are going to be putting even more risk into that. So if you are a shipper and you try to use an FAK to protect you from these changes, you're going to be paying for that protection. You're going to be like paying for that insurance when you really
Yeah.
shouldn't do that. So,
Yeah. No, I'm with you on the FAKs, and that was actually probably the number one question when we hosted all those webinars. I think we had over 800 shippers join several webinars, and that had to be the number one question. Well, I have an FAK. What's going to happen with the FAK? And it
mhm,
was my belief that your FAK structure will sit exactly where it sits. However, if you move to a sub 13 scale, you could migrate slightly on where that FAK covers today versus where it will cover post July 19th, right? Those FAKs are going to stay in place. Your agreement's going to stay in place, but
yeah,
the scale will grow and change.
mhm, yep,
So I mean, I'm with you. I don't love FAKs. I know how they work. I know that if I'm a shipper, in my head, when I think about it, it simplifies things. But we've seen
mhm,
a lot of things that shippers have done to make it easier for them, but it
mhm,
translates into additional costs for the carriers because if you're not managing it and doing it the right way, the carrier now
mhm,
has to augment and do that, which typically increase their costs, right? They got to go buy dimensionalizers. They got to
yeah,
use production time to dimensionalize everything. If I'm a
mhm,
carrier and I know that my customer uses Cubiscan, I would
mhm,
love to get like a validated dimensionalized check mark and go, cool, I don't got to waste production on this. This came from a certified dimensionalizer. I'm just going to load and go and trust the source of truth.
yeah. Yeah, and I think from a shipper, I think you need to be mindful of what the FAK is doing to you when you're allocating your costs, because
Mhm.
when you've got that mixture of freight, some that's very dense and some that's very bulky, and you're taking those freight charges, how are you allocating that back to what you make and what you ship? Because if
Yeah.
you're just doing it on a shipment by shipment basis or on a tonnage basis, you're applying too much cost to your dense items and not enough to your bulky items, and that's
Hmm.
making you think that you're making money on stuff when maybe you're not making near as much money. And that, if you remove that cross subsidization by killing the FAK, you're going to get that right cost attributed to each shipment, each pallet properly, and not have that situation
Yep.
going on. I mean,
And
that's
and
what
I
that's what the
was
carriers want. They want that granularity where they make the profit they want on every shipment. They don't want to make an average profit where they lose money on some and make money on others. They want to make what they want on every single shipment.
yeah, I'm with you there. And it was funny. I was talking to a larger shipper, and this is where the FAKs get even more interesting. Is he's got an FAK by carrier, but all the FAKs are different. There is no, hey, my FAK with Avrit, Saya, and Old Dominion is all the same. So now it's even harder for them to manage and measure these changes. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know why you wouldn't just want density pricing, period, because everything you ship is a nested commodity, which is a
Mhm,
nightmare to class and rate anyway.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, they would
So
definitely be better off just killing them all off, and then now you've got all the carriers on the same level set, right? So,
yeah. And I think you've seen what the NMFTA is doing. I think the 99 provisions, this is just the start. And we know that they had more changes they wanted to push, but they were time boxed in from a
mhm,
research standpoint and a collaboration communication standpoint. You
yeah,
and I darn well know there could be 50 more provisions next year that they couldn't fit in this year. So this
yeah.
change is coming.
I think by the time they're done, they're going to be changing substantially all of what's in there. And when you think about it, and I'm just making commodities up, NMF items numbers up. So telephone poles. Let's say there's an
Mhm.
NMF item number that is 4 telephone poles. If they tried to go in on July 19th with, let's make that a density item, obviously the carriers would say, wait, time out. I don't want to haul a 25-foot long telephone pole where the class is purely based on density, right? You've got to
Yep.
account for handling and stowing and things like that, right? So they obviously left items like that out, but they're going to come back to them because even a telephone pole that has humongous handling characteristic issues, it still has density issues, right? If you make your telephone poles hollow versus solid, they're going to be lighter. And so you need to account for density even on items that are hard to handle. And so
Yeah.
that's what they're going to do over time is figure out how do I blend all that together.
Yeah.
So
No, Scooter, my rep told me top freight rides free. It just goes on top.
it's the big old block of Swiss cheese. You're just filling in the hole, right? Whatever goes in the hole, it's
Yeah.
all fruit, right? So
Yeah. No, I remember that. Top freight rides free. No
Hmm.
more.
Yeah, no handling
No.
costs, no nothing. So
Yeah. So you did your first round of quarterly earnings, and we saw some good successes. I think a lot of it was pretty flat. I think you'll agree that there was certain carriers out there, especially like XPO and Saya, that made a lot of terminal investments, and you saw that hit to the OR, mid to late 24 and 25. They're starting to flush out, fill those service centers, get to a
mhm.
level of profitability. Who surprised you the most on the quarterly earnings?
Yeah, I think first off, I'm impressed with all of the carriers. I mean, I wish I had time to go stack up all of the LTL carriers and their performance against the biggest of the truckload carriers. I know
Yeah.
what I'm going to find. I know what I'm going to find is that the LTL carriers are navigating the waters far better than the truckload carriers are from a
Yeah.
profitability standpoint. I mean, the LTL carriers, even though they benefited from Yellow shutting down, they're still in a massive recession where business is down, even when you pull Yellow out of the mix, right? And they're weathering it. And then the other thing too, I think you got to be mindful of is the fact that these carriers are not all the same. They all didn't form at the same time and grow up at the same time. Each
Yep.
one of them is on their own track, and so it's hard to look at any of them and be too judgmental because it's not so much about where they are, what they're doing today. It's what they're trying to get to be in the future. We've got
Yeah.
carriers like ABF and Syed, the public carriers. We've got A2E Pile, the private carrier. They just celebrated 100 years in business recently, right? And they
Yep.
plan on being around for another 100 years. So, but all that being said, I think that XPO is probably surprising me, impressing me the most because they've invested a humongous amount of money into their network. That comes at a cost. That comes with not just a cost of the money it takes to do that, but the effort it takes to do that. It,
Mhm.
it involves everybody, and they're getting that done while simultaneously improving their margins in a downturn. And
Yep.
I think that's really impressive what they have going on. They've got a lot of real good blocking and tackling going on right now.
And they've done a lot of that in the local market, not necessarily national or up market, right? They've done a
Mhm.
really good job on that local SMB front from like a field AE perspective, or LAE as
Mhm.
they call them, instead of like an NAE, right? National account growth perspective. They've really done a good job in those local channels.
Yeah, yeah, they've made it very clear that's a focus for them, and
Mhm.
they're winning in that. So.
Yeah. Now, what's going on over there at Cubiscan? What's new? I know that all these NMFTA changes we just
Mhm.
went through have probably kicked up a lot of focus on dimensionalizers and bringing those in house, but dimensionalizers for shippers are still a pretty new tool, right? And
Mhm.
a lot of the big boys, like most companies, your larger shippers and companies with the money to invest in this technology, absorb it first. Are you seeing more of your ability to go downstream with some of these changes and get into different markets than you've been in before?
Yeah, and it's a great question because up until about a year ago, most of the sales that we had for pallet type dimensioners was going to LTL carriers, air cargo handlers,
Hmm.
freight forwarders, service providers, right?
Yeah.
Not shippers. If we had a shipper that was getting one of our pallet systems, it was more likely due to master data purposes, right? I'm a warehouse for an airline, and I'm bringing in fuselages and large items, and I need to know how big they are before I store them.
Yeah.
Not so much for shipping, right? So we just didn't sell that much to the shipper community, partly because the systems we had were not really geared for them.
Hmm.
They work great for cross dock. They work great for a master data type process for large items, but they didn't work great for a shipper's dock. We've now got some systems that do. We've had one that works with a stretch wrapper that we rolled out about 2 years ago.
Hmm.
It's a really slick system. And we've got a new system that we are just now releasing that you don't have to have a stretch wrapper with it. Both of those systems use LiDAR lasers. That's our sensor of choice for large items. We use camera based systems for small items like boxes. but
Hmm.
we find that it's limiting when you get to large items for a couple of different reasons. And we like that LiDAR laser. It's just super accurate, super dependable, and it can measure everything. So we are getting more and more involved on the shipper side. It's a different type of clientele, but it's super exciting getting to work with these folks these days.
Yeah. And it's funny because LiDAR technology itself has been around for a while now, and a lot of it
Mhm.
was used in more like scientific and research realms. It's really cool to see that LiDAR radar effect coming into the freight world in respects to measuring freight out and getting it done.
Yeah.
Are you guys doing anything to morph your model or become more cloud and user friendly from that perspective as you start attacking the shipper market? Are you guys finding that we're going to have to augment a little bit versus focusing on service providers? There's definitely
Mhm.
some changes that have to be made to the core product in order to really
Mhm.
get this
Yeah,
connected.
and our systems tend to be more geared towards a higher volume shipper, and so if we had a product that would be viable for like someone shipping 2 or 3 pallets per day, they may be fine with a process that's still digital yet still very basic, like print
Hmm.
a label for me, but store the data in the cloud. That's one thing that we've rolled out recently is we have a cloud solution. So if customers want that, as soon as the data is captured on a device. And this would cover not just like our pallet dimensioners, but if you're a customer that's got master data needs, I'm measuring nuts and bolts on the inbound side, and then I'm measuring my pallets on the outbound side, and I've got 5 different Cubiscan dimensioners, different types of dimensioners. We can get all those on the cloud, so anyone with a browser can pull up all of that data. So that's
Yeah.
definitely one thing we've done, and we're stepping up our activities, with some of those third-party providers to help feed our data into their platforms too. So historically, when we work with a customer, we're going straight to their WMS or ERP, and we still do
Yeah.
that a lot. But with cloud and with working with third parties, there's other avenues to get that data where it needs to go.
Yeah. Now, I don't know about you. I've definitely seen some of the volumes pick up. I know a lot of the carriers are pretty bullish and optimistic still, but if we look at the overall market, it's still pretty flat, right? Volumes have picked up a little bit. I think you're seeing some stuff with, the tariffs that have come in place and people shifting where they bring inventory in or rushing inventory in before those, tariffs went into effect. And that'll give you a short-term burst or boom, but I'm still under
Mhm.
the opinion that in the current market, LTL is still very, very ripe for levels of consolidation, right? And I think it's good for everybody. But there was a big shakeup that happened with Amazon's announcement, right? Which was pretty
Yeah.
vague of getting into
Mhm.
LTL because they weren't very specific on it. They just
Yeah.
said they wanted to enter the market. And now
Mhm.
you've had this big uproar. You've seen all these different armchair warriors like me with their opinions out there. I'm just
Yeah.
curious, what are your thoughts on that in today's current environment,
Mhm.
between LTL consolidation that's out there? It's probably 80 common providers.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more LTL consolidation going on than some people suspect.
Yes.
All the big retailers are doing that, right? They're still shipping tremendously with the LTL carriers, but they're also doing a lot of internal consolidation work.
Hmm.
Amazon brings a scale to do that, right? They have the scale where if they can figure out how to take their scale, and I'm shipping, 3 pallets per day, they could figure out how to pull my business into their scale and make something happen with that. I think
Yeah.
so. I think even if they just expand out what they're doing and do more consolidation work and get more LTL into their network, their freight, I think they're going to have an impact, just like what they have on parcel. I mean, look at UPS parcel. Today, that's 10% of their business is Amazon, and they're trying to get
Hmm.
it cut back to 5%, right? So, Amazon is probably 3 to 4% total of LTL carrier revenue. So if they were able to pull most of that out and handle it internally, that's a big chunk of business that the carriers lose.
Yeah,
So
it is. But I think about it too from an infrastructure standpoint, right? Like the way Amazon is built today, they do have a spoke and hub model in the form of
mhm,
how they deliver parcel, right? And I,
yeah,
I was talking to Curtis about this on a previous show. Is Amazon does one thing really well right now, and that's deliver.
mhm,
one thing I don't see Amazon doing, all doesn't mean they can't. I know they don't enter markets, they dominate them,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
pick up. Do they
Right.
have the pickup infrastructure? Which is why it kind of begs the question to me is, what does it mean when you say you're going to enter LTL? Are you looking at it like a flock freight model where you're going to do like 3 or 4 milk runs, right? And call that LTL? Is it,
Mhm.
I'm really going to invest in LTL? Do you go buy industrial real estate? Do you go buy a carrier? Can you
Mhm.
use your existing network without offsetting or augmenting how the business flows today?
Yeah. I think what they do is something more like what Aceva Logistics does, which runs a $1 billion US LTL operation, but it's all outsourced. You know, they may own some brick and mortar, but they
Mm-hmm.
outsource the pickup. They outsource the line haul and they just connect all the dots on that. And they, like what Amazon does, is they work backwards from the customer. They find out what the customer wants and then they go build a process for handling that customer's business rather than
Mm-hmm.
building a traditional LTL network and saying customers, this is how I operate. So, you know, that's the thing that Amazon's so good about is figuring out what customers want and need and then working backwards from that. So what I know they're not going to do is just go out and build a traditional LTL carrier network. They're not
Yep.
going to do that because that's backwards to their thinking. So,
No, I'm with you there. That's why I think it's a very interesting announcement. And it's something that I'm very interested in. And then that kind of parlays into the announcement prior to that with FedEx wanting to, decouple parcel and LTL, which that's going to be no easy task.
mhm.
That could be a 2-year journey. Like
Yeah, I mean,
that's
I think we learned a lot of that from, UPS selling to T-Force. That was a multi-year process of unwinding all of the connections going on there. And again, while you're doing that, your eye is not on the ball.
mhm.
You're decoupling rather than running a business. So
Yep.
that's why I think they've announced this as being like an 18-month spinoff. There's just so much work that needs in planning that needs to be done. You don't just like spin off and we're done. So,
No, no, especially for somebody that's picking up almost 2x the volume
mhm,
of like your second, third, and fourth largest carriers in the
yeah,
industry. Like
yeah.
it's a beast.
And they've got so many different departments that are shared, like, pricing, where they've got shared pricing, where they've got to go separate that out. And how do you do that without affecting, freight and then the parcel side too? So there's just a lot to do here.
Yeah,
And
because the LTL side, you can't have, at least from my perspective, you can't have just an LTL account. You also have to have a parcel account because those two are linked on the back end from a tech
Mhm.
stack perspective. So
Yeah.
whether you do it or not, you got to have one, and they're all intertwined. So this is, not only the physical change management of people and resources and assets, but the technology piece of this is a huge part of the decoupling.
Yeah, yeah. But I think there's tremendous opportunity for them if they get it done right to really find success here by, being their separate standalone company that gets to
Yeah.
make their own decisions for them and they're not held accountable to somebody else, from a big picture standpoint. So
All
I know
right.
there's a lot of excitement over there about it. So
Oh, I know there is. All right, Scooter, we've buried almost a hour in of some good discussion here. I'm going to put you on the spot with some words of wisdom on any one of these topics that we've covered today. Is there anything you want to leave our shipper, carrier community, tech provider community with? Anything that is top of mind for you?
Circling back to the NMF changes, there's just going to be a lot of impact on this. I mean, there are various industry pundits that have referred to this as the biggest change ever in LTL, the biggest change since deregulation.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be big. It's gonna be impactful, not so much from a revenue standpoint, but just impactful from some of the disruptions that take place. And it's just incumbent upon everybody to get in front of it and work together to solve it. And I think that's where shippers just need to be made aware if they're not already aware of it. And that's up to the carriers and 3PLs to help make them aware of it if they can. The
Yep.
NMFTA has done a great job, but they can only reach so many people with what they do. So from a shipper standpoint, you just got to know about it and you just got to start thinking about this because again, it's not just a change on July 19th and then you go from there. It's going to be a continual step after step after step. So if you think
Yeah.
that you didn't get impacted in July, that just means you're going to get impacted later.
Yeah.
And you just got to understand all the layers about this. It's going to get complex and confusing, but you got to go find some folks to help navigate the waters for you.
Yep, I'm with you there. Well, I appreciate you jumping on with us, Scooter. I'm excited for this change to finally happen. I think it's the right thing for the industry. I think it's the right thing for the shippers and tech providers like us.
Hmm.
But it's change nonetheless. So it's going to be interesting. And I think you're going to have about 3 to 6 months of fallout, right? I compare it to a volcano
Yeah.
erupting, right?
Hmm.
The big boom happens, but then you have the fall of ash and settling before you really see clean air and understand the impacts to what just happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and by the time that dust settles, you're going to get 50 more provisions for next year because they couldn't fit them all into this year. So,
Then you got to worry about the next eruption, right? So,
yes, yep,
so.
it'll be pretty interesting, man. But thanks for coming on, Scooter. Let's definitely do another one of these here pretty soon. And thanks for hopping on.
All right. Thanks, Bobby. Appreciate it.
All right.